All right. So fatty acid metabolism. To review what happened, we mentioned that after we digest the fatty acids, after we break it with lipases, of course, those are packaged and they go through the bloodstream in chylomicrons. Those are lipoproteins. They will go and travel eventually to the adipose tissues, to the fat cells, where they are prepared for storage. They will be there, and then when we're ready to use them, when we need energy, when, for example, glycolysis is not enough, then we need the energy from the fatty acids. And so this energy from the fatty acid then dictate that we need to mobilize those fatty acids in the adipose tissues, in the fat cells, in the fat tissues where they're stored. And the main enzyme for this is called lipase, triglycerol lipase. Lipases are enzymes that break the triglycerides into free fatty acids and glycerol. All right? And those lipases are controlled by phosphorylation as well. If you phosphorylate them, in other words, if you add a phosphate group to one of the amino acids on the protein, it becomes active. And what phosphorylates it is protein kinase A, which is the same protein kinase A we've been seeing and encountering throughout the semester. All right, so phosphorylation increase necessarily lipolysis. Lipolysis or lipolysis, that's breaking the lipids and hence beta oxidation. All right, please do stop me as I go if you have any questions. Okay, of course, that's what happened here. Triglycerides are broken by lipases into fatty acids, 3 fatty acid molecules. So 1 mole of triglycerides and then 3 moles of fatty acids and 1 mole of glycerol. We already know what happens to glycerol. That's gluconeogenesis or the rest of glycolysis. While fatty acids need to be transported, of course, to the blood. Do you remember free fatty acids, how they're transported to the blood? How are they transported in the blood, the free fatty acids? Those are free fatty acids. So that means they come from adipose tissues, right? They come in the adipose tissues. All right, what's that? What's B? Albumin, that's right. Albumin is the enzyme. Indeed. Okay, what about the fatty acids that are absorbed in the intestines? How are they transported? What about those fatty acids? The ones we just ate and they are in the intestines and now they're sent to the adipose tissues. How are those transported? That's true. Okay, here's a part of a very nice poem, a song that I really love about fatty acid beta oxidation, which is it's a pathway in the cell that metabolizes well fatty acid chains in the most effective way to acetylcholine. The professor, Harold Baum, by the way, he back in the 50s and 60s, he in King's College, I believe, in England, he every Christmas party for the department, he would come up with a song like this. And this is his beta oxidation song, which is very nice. I keep saying I want to look for it and put it in the E2L so you can guys enjoy it as well. It's a very nice icebreaker actually for any conversation. Okay, no, seriously. All right. So now back to the metabolic integration. Triglycerides, we get glycerol that go into glycolysis and gluconeogenesis, depending on the cell needs. And then, of course, the fatty acids go into beta oxidation. So let's review the beta oxidation. Beta oxidation, right? So the first thing to do is the fatty acids cannot be used as such. They have to be activated, and they're activated via linkage to coenzyme A. And that gives us a side coenzyme A. The enzyme is fatty acid thiokinases or acyl coenzyme A synthetase. Acyl coenzyme A synthetase. Okay? It makes an acyl coenzyme A. Okay? And do you remember? Because of the slide, how many ATPs are used with any in this reaction and this activation? It's an activation of the fatty acid, the fatty acyl coenzyme A. Is there energy involved in this? And the answer will be C. What is C? That will be 2. That's right. ATP to AMP. That is absolutely right. Okay, so 2 equivalents to ATP are generated. Okay? Now, the next thing is, this happens in the cytosol. The next thing is to transport them to the actual mitochondria. And we mentioned at that point the molecule carnitine. We said we don't need to memorize the structure of carnitine. We need to be very aware of carnitine. And carnitine is a molecule that has a transporter that is recognized by it. Okay? And the transporter is a translocase. It's carnitine translocase. What happens there is an enzyme called carnitine acyltransferase. And carnitine acyltransferase means it has a carnitine and it has an acyl, and they transfer to each other to make acylcarnitine. There are 2 flavors of this enzyme, one in the mitochondria and one in the cytosol. So the first one in the cytosol gives us acylcarnitine, which becomes recognized by the translocase, and then that is moved inside the mitochondria. Inside the mitochondria, we will have the same enzyme, carnitine acyltransferase 2, it's a different isozyme, but does the same thing, and that transfers it back to coenzyme A. So now we have acyl coenzyme A, but we have it inside the mitochondria. Inside the mitochondria. Carnitine. It helps mobilize fat inside the mitochondria. How many ATPs do you think produced here? For the transport, for any transportation process, in this case, carnitine, or the fatty acids inside the mitochondria. Yes.
What's the difference between 0 and does not require?
That is a great question. And that's why both of them are correct. Right? 0 does not require any energy. Well, 0, that means no ATP is involved. But does not require energy means no ATP is involved. Make sense? All right. So it doesn't require energy. Really, the idea here is it doesn't require any energy on it. All right. So the overview of beta oxidation, we mentioned we have oxidation, hydration, oxidation. Right? Oxidation, hydration, oxidation. And the idea is, because the name has the name suggests, the beta oxidation, is to convert the carbon beta, carbon number 3, into a ketone in order to break it by 2, to break the fatty acid by 2. And sure enough, this is carbon number 3, 1, 2, 3, or carbon beta, becomes, at the end of the process, a ketone. Carbon number 3 becomes all the way a ketone. And then, of course, that's broken by the addition of another coenzyme A. And the result, of course, is acetyl coenzyme A and an acyl coenzyme A minus 2. Okay? Make sense so far? Remember that? All right. Now, in what cellular compartment does this process, beta oxidation, take place? Where in the cell it happens, the beta oxidation? It's actually can become very important because we are going to discuss something very important today, which is the fatty acid synthesis. Fatty acid synthesis. Beta oxidation, where does it is? Inside the mitochondria. That's right, inside the mitochondria. Remember, we already did the transport of the fatty acid inside the mitochondria through carnitine. through carnitine. All right, of course, the first reaction, the cycloenzyme in the hydrogenase, the removal of the 2 electrons from there, and that will give us an enoid, a double bond. When we remove a pair of electrons from a single bond, it becomes a double bond. Hey there. It becomes a double bond. Now, that is called enoid, and of course it's trans delta 2, and the receptor of those electrons is FADH2, and hence that gives us, of course, 1.5 molecules of ATP. Electrons themselves, of course, go through electron transport flavoprotein all the way to ubiquinol. Okay? Before they end up in the chain, the electron transport chain, ubiquinol is our final receiver of this. All right, the enoid then, of course, is hydrated, and that gives us an alcohol, and it's called beta-hydroxyacylcoenzyme A, or 3-hydroxyacylcoenzyme A, because carbon number 3 has an hydroxyl group, and it's still an acyl, of course, coenzyme A. Now, remember that this has to be trans, and it has to be delta between 2 and 3. Otherwise, the hydratase will not recognize it. The hydratase will not recognize it. So that's an important point. And then, of course, we have our second dehydrogenation, or second oxidation. And, of course, the receiver here is NAD, becomes NADH. And that will give us, of course, the 2.5 equivalents of ATP. And that will give us beta-ketoacylcoenzyme, or 3-ketoacylcoenzyme A. And now, this molecule is ready to be broken by 2, right there. And so those 2 ketones really are the flags where it will allow the breakage of this molecule to take place, because this bond now is weak. All right? And that is beta-ketothiolase. All right? Beta-ketothiolase, because it's beta-ketothiolase, or thiolase sometimes, so an enzyme that breaks that enzyme. So reversible reaction, by the way. Okay, that gives us paclitaxel. All right. Now, we talked about 2 exceptions on Wednesday. One of them is what about unsaturated fatty acids, and the other one, odd number fatty acids. And here we mentioned 2 things. We mentioned an example, of course, the palmitoid that has 16 carbons. And in this case, palmitoid, of course, has 8 and 9, the double bond. The delta is between 8 and 9. And usually we have 7 carbons here, so we can have 3 normal beta oxidations, because this is a long chain as I drew on Wednesday. And once we get close to the beta atom, the beta carbon, like here 3, 4, then we have to do some isomerization, which is basically the rearrangement of the hydrogens and the double bond. And remember, what was the problem here? What was the problem with this intermediate? You guys remember what was the problem with this intermediate? Why? Thank you. All right. Now there are 2 problems with this. Remember, because the hydratase enzyme does not recognize it, does it? The hydratase cannot recognize this because it is not E. That's right, because it is cis, and the double bond is between what and what? 3 and 4. It's going to be 2 and 3. Hydratase doesn't recognize it. So the idea is to have an enzyme that will allow the hydratase to recognize it, and that enzyme is an isomerase. It's called cis delta 3 coenzyme A isomerase. Once that isomerase, then beta go normal. The only thing is we have missed one FADH2. So the unsaturated fatty acids will actually cost us 1.5 ATP or 1 flavine adenine dinucleotide in a reduced form. Okay? So for each unsaturation, at least for the purpose of this course, for each one unsaturation, we are going to lose 1.5 ATP. Or we are going to lose 1 FADH2. Okay? For each unsaturation. And that makes sense. Because unsaturation means those high energy electrons are gone. Otherwise, it cannot be unsaturated. Any questions so far? Any questions? Cool. All right. What about odd chain fatty acids? We drew that as well, and what happens at the very end, we're going to end up with 5 carbon acyl coenzyme A, and one of them will, of course, become acylatic A, and that will leave us with a 3 carbon acyl coenzyme A, and that 3 carbon is propionide coenzyme A. Propionide coenzyme A. And that's where we start. What are we going to do with propionide coenzyme A? We're going to do something very interesting with propionide coenzyme A. Something that we are half familiar with and half not familiar with. The half that we're not familiar with is this reaction right here. Propionide coenzyme A is actually carboxylated. That is, it's carboxylated. So the enzyme is propionide coenzyme A carboxylase. It carboxylated all the way to methylmalonyl coenzyme A that is then mutated to succinyl coenzyme A. Mutated to succinyl coenzyme A. I didn't activate that figure. One second. So there are 2 things happening here. Carboxylation of propionide coenzyme A. That means we added a carbon, right? So from 3 to 4 carbon molecule, and that molecule is methylmalonyl coenzyme A. Now, mutase, what does mutase do? Mutases, what do? They transfer a group from one carbon to another. Yeah? And that's exactly what happened. Is this methyl group has been transferred. It's been transferred or rearranged to give us something, the other half that we're familiar with, which is succinyl coenzyme A. Now, do you remember what happened to succinyl coenzyme A? I just activated the question. What happens to succinyl coenzyme A? All right. Succinyl coenzyme A is converted to you see a cycle converted to what molecule? Right here, succinate. Okay? Now we are in a very familiar territory. That's the citric acid cycle. So now we have 2 links in the odd chain fatty acids to citric acid cycle. One is through what? Acetyl coenzyme A, and the other through succinyl coenzyme A. There are 2 links, succinyl coenzyme A. So obviously, the propionide coenzyme A by itself will give us less energy than acetyl coenzyme A, or more energy. What do you think? Less or more? Less. That's because it didn't start from the beginning of the cycle. So we really missed an NADH step right here, an NADH step right here. Right? We missed 2 NADH steps. So we started right here where we have ATP, FAD, and NAD. Make sense? We'll have some action questions, action-centered questions about these calculations. All right. So that's succinyl coenzyme A into the citric acid cycle. So that's pretty much about the oxidation of fatty acids. Okay? Really. It's beta oxidation, very simple. Dehydrogenation, hydration, dehydrogenation. And then if we have unsaturation, we have to do some isomerization and then continue the fatty acid beta oxidation. If we have odd numbers, we'll still go through oxidation, hydrogen oxidation, but the very last molecule that's produced, which is the propionide, has to be converted to succinyl coenzyme A through methylmalonyl coenzyme A. Okay? Now the detail of that reaction, those 2 reactions, is not important because there's isomerization, and really without that isomerization, bad things would happen. Speaking of bad things, we have another bad thing that might happen. That's in the peroxisome. Now this is very interesting. Why do we have peroxisomes, and why do they have to do this? Well, we really don't know, at least I don't know most of the answers, but peroxisomes are organelles, they're bound to a membrane, they have their compartment basically, and they call peroxisomes because they produce a lot of peroxide, hydrogen peroxide, H2O2. And that H2O2 usually converted to water by catalysts. Okay? What happens in our bodies is that very long fatty acids somehow tend to go there first and be shortened to about 8 carbons. Shortened to 8 carbons, and then those can go to the mitochondria afterwards. Okay? Now, So to shorten, let's say, 16 carbon fatty acid to 8, it has to go through beta oxidation, right? The same beta. The only difference of the beta oxidation in the peroxisome and the beta oxidation in the mitochondria is the first oxidation step happens through this enzyme here. Okay? The electrons don't leave FADH2 to go to the ubiquitin. Instead, they go straight to oxygen. That is the only difference. And hence, no ATP produced from those FADH2 at all. Nothing. They go immediately to oxygen, that's converted to hydrogen peroxide and UR eventually. Okay? That's what the peroxisomes do. They shorten our fatty acids to 8 carbon, and somehow, maybe those are manageable by the mitochondria afterwards. Okay? If you don't have a peroxisome, actually it's a bad thing. Then we might have a disease called most of the diseases that are associated with peroxisomal deficiencies or defects usually end up with pathological, neurological disorders and other stuff. And most actually patients die at a very young age before they get fit. Okay? So it's a serious thing, obviously we need it. By the way, in other organisms, not just us, in other organisms, the peroxisomes can do glycolysis, they can do glycoside cycle, which we cannot do. They can actually produce plasminogen. We don't talk about that. It's some sort of fatty acid derivative that's used in the neurons. And that's possibly might be the reason why the defects in this takes their toll and almost diseases like Zoma. All right. So what's the function of peroxisomes? To shorten the fatty acids. Okay? They oxidize fatty acid, they shorten it. And the only difference is the FADH2 is not utilized. All right. Any questions about this? All right. Now we will move to the synthesis of fatty acids, which is very, very important thing. Okay? Now, to start with synthesis, we're going to start with a comparison. Remember, glycolysis and gluconeogenesis, for example, they actually both have a cytoplasm, but they are not exactly the opposite of each other. Even though chemically they will produce the opposite molecules, but they're not exactly opposite to each other. Same thing here in the fatty acid world. So we talk about the degradation of fatty acids, and here is our synthesis of fatty acids. Now, the reactions still are chemically opposite to what happened there, but the circumstances and the physical location totally different. Okay? So let's start this comparison. The first thing here will take place in the mitochondria, right? The beta oxidation. The synthesis of fatty acid happened in the cytoplasm. The fatty acid happened in the cytoplasm. All right, what else? Intermediates, the activation happens through coenzyme A. In the fatty acid synthesis, it happens through protein called ACP, or acid carrier protein. Acid carrier protein. It's a 77 amino acid peptide that carries the fatty acid rather than coenzyme A. All right. Now those enzymes in the beta oxidation are separate enzymes. They're closely related, but they're separate. They're not associated. They're not physically linked. And the beta and the synthesis of fatty acids, it's about part of a humongous complex, a very big complex of all those enzymes as subdomains. So they're associated physically in a big complex. Collectively, this complex is called fatty acid synthase. Fatty acid synthase. It has several enzymes in it that we will talk about in those. All right. The acyl group is activated by acyl coenzyme A. Here it's also activated by ACP. So ACP is not just the carrier, but it's also the activator of the acyl group. The oxidation, or the electrons equivalents that are used in beta oxidation are NAD and FAD. Of course, in any reductive synthesis, as we've seen in the metabolic concept, is NADPH, nicotinamide adenine dinucleotide phosphate. So that's our source of electrons. We're building fatty acids. That means we are stuffing those bonds with high energy electrons, and those high energy electrons are carried by NADPH. Obviously, we have a lot of energy to make fatty acids. Otherwise, we won't waste those electrons on making bonds. Oxidation, it occurs almost at any length of fatty acid. Okay? Basically, if it's too long, it will go through peroxisomes, but the enzyme system that we have in the beta oxidation can handle any fatty acid that's thrown at it. And the surfaces, we will stop at 16. We cannot build more than 16. Anything else has to be elongated, and that needs a special permission. Plus, we have something that's called actually essential fatty acid that we cannot even make. Okay? As simple as it sounds, just building by 2, that's actually not that easy because we don't have all our enzymes. Carnitine is the transporter. Here is citrate is the transporter. Why do we need transporter? Why do we need transporter for fatty acid synthesis? Carnitine, we know why, because the fatty acids will come to the cytosol and they need to be transported, right? We have the carnitine that transports. But why do we need a transporter for the activated? Okay? So first of all, where is that fatty acetylcholine? Where is that acetylcholine? What compartments are they in? Acetylcholine. So far, when we talked about acetylcholine, pyruvate converted acetylcholine, beta oxidation, what compartment is that? That is in the acetylcholine is actually almost always exclusively in the mitochondria. Absolutely. Acetylcholine in the mitochondria. Because citric acid cycle happens in the mitochondria. Most of the stuff that's broken into acetylcholine and they end up in the mitochondria. Right? So that's where most of the acetylcholine in our body required. But acetylcholine happen to also be something we need to build. It's a building block. So the second question would be how to get it out of the mitochondria. How to get the acetylcholine, which is our building block, out of the mitochondria. How do you think? Is it diffusion or is it something we unfortunately have to know in the next slide? I'll let you guess. All right. So that happens through, like everything else, of course, we need a transporter of some sort, right? We need a transport mechanism. What do we have here? I see most of us are in agreement. All right. And that will be B. Okay? I'm sorry for the 11 people that think it's just diffusion. You're going to have to put another path here. All right. Acetylcholine needs to leave the mitochondria. And it cannot leave the mitochondria because in the mitochondria, it is a very important part of the citric acid cycle and it gives energy. So really, unless we have a lot of it, usually citric acid cycle has the priority. Now that we have a lot of it and we can build fatty acids, we need to get it out. Getting it out is going to happen through actually partially very familiar path. We're just gonna rearrange the reaction that we already know in a different way. We already know most of those reactions. All right, let's go to the citric acid cycle. Let's go to the first reaction of the citric acid cycle. And that was what? The condensation of acetylcholine with oxaloacetate to make citric. All right? So technically, the 2 carbon unit of the acetylcholine, it's inside the citrate. And the enzyme, of course, is citrate synthase. We know that. Now, the part of the story that's new to us is that citrate has a transporter that will allow it to go out. Now, are we surprised that citrate goes out at all, by the way? Have we not seen citrate as an allosteric effector of some of the glycolytic enzymes? Right? Remember, it inhibits allosterically the pyruvate dehydrogenase and the phosphofructokinase, right? Because it's an indicator of plenty of carbon. Well, here's why it's an indicator of plenty of carbon. Because we have a lot of fatty acids now, other carbon to build fatty acids. So when it's out, you really do not need energy. And so part of the citrate job is to inhibit glycolytic enzymes, allosterically. See how things are linked? Citrate is out. It will go back to oxaloacetate. And acetylcholine now is free to go into fatty acid synthesis, which is what we are talking about. All right, now the enzyme, this enzyme doesn't do it reversibly. the enzyme is called citrate lyase. We have seen another enzyme. Yeah. We have seen another enzyme called isocitrate lyase. That's different. That's part of the glycosylate cycle. All right, now oxaloacetate need to come back to the mitochondria because, again, mitochondria's chemicals are different from the cytosolic chemicals. And so here, the cell will take advantage of something very important. Something that will surprise us all, actually. The first thing, oxaloacetate can be converted to malate, and that's malate dehydrogenase. Is this enzyme new for us? Oh, you've seen it, right? You've seen malate dehydrogenase. Citric acid cycle, at least. All right. Malate, now this is new. We have not seen this one. Malate is converted to pyruvate through something called malate enzyme. Now, this is a very important enzyme, very powerful enzyme. We're not going to talk much about it, but what is part of the product of this enzyme? NADPH. So we have another source of NADPH. Pentose phosphate pathway, right? Through the two oxidation steps of glucose 6-phosphate. Now we have malate enzyme gives us also from NADPH. So really, half of the NADPH requirement for fatty acid synthesis, comes from this enzyme. Okay? The deficiency of this enzyme will cause numerous problems that we're not going to go into. So malate enzyme is another source of NADPH. This is a very important point. Now, pyruvate, we know that it goes inside the mitochondria because we know in glycolysis, when it's produced, it can go to the mitochondria to produce, of course, coenzyme A. So pyruvate will go in, and pyruvate then can be converted to oxaloacetate through the enzyme we know, pyruvate carboxylase. Have you seen carboxylase before? Pyruvate? I've seen it, right? All right. As a matter of fact, let me ask you this. Pyruvate carboxylase, oxaloacetate, malate, back to oxaloacetate. This red line, what does this represent? Do you remember that? Which pathway was that? Which pathway was that? This was part of getting, if pyruvate happens to be outside to the cytosol, and it is gluconeogenesis and citric acid cycle. Actually, I have to take that. It's part of citric acid cycle too. Yes. But pyruvate happens in the cytoplasm. Citric acid cycle completely happens in the mitochondria. I'm going to take it just because I'm a nice guy, but this part that malate goes out to the cytosol in order to use it for gluconeogenesis happens in the cytoplasm. So this is part of the gluconogenic pathway. Yes, the gluconogenic pathway we use oxaloacetate. All right. So we see here really the new thing is malate enzyme. That's the only new thing. Everything else is just reutilizing the reaction that we already know in order to get things out. Of course, we need a transporter for this. All right, any questions about getting acetyl group, the 2-carbon unit, out from the mitochondria to the cytosol? Any energies used here? No, not really. As a matter of fact, we have energy produced as NADPH, which is our high energy electron that we'll use in a little bit. Okay, moving on. So now we're going to have a committed step. A step that when it happens, it means those carbons are fated to go into the biosynthetic pathway for fatty acids. Here is acetylcholine. Now remember what was the carrier for biosynthesis of fatty acids? ACP. So obviously we have to exchange hands. So the acetyl group has to leave coenzyme and go to ACP. So that's a transferase enzyme. That's a very simple thing. It needs some energy. And here we have we have the malonide coenzyme A. What happened? What is this reaction? Malonide. We went from acetyl to malonide. We went from 2 carbons to 1, 2, 3 carbons. We added CO2. What is this called? Carboxylation, right? Okay. So that's actually step number 1. That is a very important committed step. Those 2 carbons from acetyl coenzyme A, this reaction is telling the cell that those 2 carbons are reserved now to build fatty acids. We added the 2 carbon units. We added energy to that. You will see in a little bit why. So this is energetically rich molecule, because this carbon dioxide is easily left. It can leave easily, and it can produce energy because of this. This is a very important trick. And the enzyme is acetyl-coenzyme carboxylase, controlled enzyme. We'll talk about that as well. Now, by the way, this enzyme, acetyl-transacylase, is very specific to acetyl. However, let's say propionate coenzyme comes. It will still do that reaction and produce propionate ACP, that 3-carbon ACP. It will be much, much slower. Much, much slower. And this is very important to also keep in the back of your mind as we're going through the synthesis. We can make a 3-carbon propionate ACP. All right, this is basically what I just talked about here. Okay? So I just left this as a summary for you. Now let's look at the big fatty acid synthase enzyme. Okay? This is the entry unit where you have the 2 acetyl and the malonyl will go into here. We have the acetyl here, the AT, and the malonyl here, and then we here have our actually part of the ACP. The second unit, this is the unit where the opposite reactions happen from the beta oxidation. So the opposite of oxidation, hydration, oxidation would be what? Reduction, dehydration, reduction. And that's exactly what happens. Reduction, dehydration, reduction. This is exactly how fatty acids are built. And here is the dehydratase, here are the 2 reductases, the enol and the keto reductases. Okay, it's actually chemically the opposite. But notice, the enzymes are not separate. They are actually part of a humongous enzyme again. They're actually all linked, with weak bonds, covalent bonds. A lot of structural changes happen. A lot of conformational changes happen for this to work. So you can imagine the task that is taking place here. After we're done with building 2 at a time, we will actually release 16. It will stop at 16 carbon. Our fatty acid synthase stop at 16 carbon. Cannot build more than 16 carbon. So this is called palmitate release, and it's called thioesterase, TP, thioesterase. Okay? We cannot build more than 16. And those 16, by the way, happen to be saturated as well. Okay? And saturation, or making odd number carbons, or even going beyond 16, is something else. Something that we will separate. Let's go through the steps, which is reduction, dehydration, reduction. The first thing, we're going to have acetyl and malonyl, and they're all ACP, they're all in the entry subunit. We have to get them together. We have to force them together. Condensation. What's the last step that happens in the beta oxidation? Clear. Here, it's condensation. Okay? So every cycle we have to condense. Every cycle we have to condense. And we're condensing acetyl with malonyl. Okay? 2 plus 3 gives us 5. However, that carboxylation that we invested in before now is removed as carbon dioxide. And that is the source of energy. This removal of carbon dioxide drives this reaction. If we don't have this, then we're going to have to put more energy than we put before. Okay? So for every cycle that we have to have produced malonyl coenzyme, we have to malonyl ACP and coenzyme A, of course, before, we have to invest energy. All right, so now one of the ACPs are empty, and now we have acetoacetyl, acetoacetyl, that's 4 carbon, acetoacetyl. That's the end product from the beta oxidation. Remember when we used to break it at that point? That's what happened. So now we're going to go through the 3 steps. The reduction, dehydration, and the reduction. So basically, we want to convert this ketone into actual regular flat aliphatic molecule. All right? So the first thing, we're going to have to force electrons into its throat. And that will convert, of course, what happened when we reduce a ketone? It becomes an alcohol. All right? So this is, of course, where the first part, the condensation happened. The second part, reductase, that's the beta ketoacyl, NADPH, of course, is the product, we get an alcohol. Now, we will remove that water. We remove it by dehydratase. Okay, this is where it happens. So this is the keto reductase. See here, it's KR, right here, keto reductase. The next step is dehydration. The dehydration also happens right here, H, dehydratase. You don't need to know this stuff, by the way. I'm just showing you that it happened in the same context. All right, you don't have to remember that DH comes and then DR. That's just a pictorial. You have to worry about those reactions. So H2O is actually removed, and now we have an enoid. Okay, we have an enoid, a double bond. Crotonide, that's all right, you don't have to remember crotonide, it's basically an enoid. Now we're going to do one more reduction to make this double bond a bond. And the enzyme will be enoid reductase, a general enzyme for any enoid, not just crotonide, any enoid. And that will give us butyryl coenzyme. Butyryl, that's 4, right? Remember, methane, propane, butyryl coenzyme. So what's the next step? Are we done? We built only 4, right? Now we're going to build more. What comes to the aid of this? Another malonyl coenzyme. Why? Because we need energy to condense. We need to keep the reaction going forward. So it's not acetyl, but yet we're still adding 2 carbons at a time because this carbon dioxide is leaving. So we're really using those. And now we're adding another one, and here we are on the KO side. And the cycle will go on and on until we reach 16 carbons. Okay? Palmitoyl coenzyme, palmitoyl ACP. Any questions so far about the cycle? Now, at this point, it makes very sense. It's easy because it's the opposite of beta oxidation chemicals. Once we reach 16 carbon, 8 rounds later, then the enzyme called thioesterase, and it will break that, release it from the ACP to give us basically the palmitoic acid. All right, so that's the palmitate release. That all happen in the same complex, in the same unit. These things are happening, cycle after cycle after cycle. So very interesting thing, clinical correlation. Remember when we talk about cancer and glycolysis, how the cancer cells prefer, some cancer cells prefer to use aerobic glycolysis, even though there's oxygen, they will go into lactate fermentation. All right. Now, they have actually plenty of fatty acids to use as well. All right. But instead of using them for energy, they use it for synthesis. They build fatty acids. Why do you think they build fatty acids while they consume carbohydrates? What fatty acids are used for? What is that? No, not storage. What else? No, what else? We need new cells. We need the membranes. Membranes. Someone said membranes. We need more membranes because it's cancer. It's growing. It needs more membranes, more cells. So it's rather than using this for energy, it will use it for buildup. So it will use it movement. That's why it needs all those blood vessels, feeding it with carbohydrates as an energy source, and the fatty acids that it has, it will build it into that phospholipids in order to make membranes. Okay? As a matter of fact, interesting piece of research is that they found out that fatty synthase inhibitors can be used to reduce cancer in some extent. The problem, of course, is we don't want to reduce fatty acid synthesis in our bodies overall, because that's also bad. But since the cancer cells grow much faster than the rest of the cells, they usually take those first, and they will get the first hit. So it has to be balanced. And they're also using those for weight loss as well, to prevent us from storing fatty acids. I mean, it's still research. It's not out there yet. At least to my knowledge, it's not out there. But that's an interesting thing. So here's metabolic integration. And we have pentose phosphate pathway providing us with NADP. We have the act of getting the acetyl group, the 2-carbonyl, out of that mitochondria, and that will give us an ADP, and both of them actually fuel the fatty acid synthesis. And like I said, half of the ADPH comes from the malic enzyme reaction. And you can see then pyruvate can go back into the mitochondria and can go into another citric acid cycle, or can be ultimately utilized to get more carbon out. How cool is that? Any questions? Any questions at all about this? Fatty acids. All right. Okay. Two things about fatty acids before we leave it behind us. And that's elongated fatty acids. Obviously, we use more than just 16 carbons. And unsaturated fatty acids. We cannot do much of either. We can do a little bit, but not much. Other organisms are very developed. Okay? Another testament to our metabolic limitations, and that's why we need all these other things. All right. Elongation process, it's similar to that fatty acid synthesis. The difference, one thing I want to mention here, this is just to kind of keep also back of your mind, here is the desaturation. You would think, since you're removing high energy electrons, you're desaturating, it will be used to produce energy. Why not? They're high energy electrons. And as a matter of fact, it's not. Because we're going to need four electrons, 2 pairs of electrons. 2 will come from the desaturation process with the double bond, and 2 will come from actually NADH. So we are effectively using energy in order to desaturate fatty acids. Okay? So we just need to know that we use energy in a form of high energy electrons. How about that? Was that bad? Fatty acids? Fatty acids? Fun? Okay. Okay, how you like Feel enthusiasm from you. You can write. Okay. All right. What we're going to talk about is amino acid. Now we have 20 amino acids. We have 20 pathways to build it. We have 20 pathways to destroy it. And as I said at the beginning of the semester, we do not have to worry about this. Right? We will just conceptually know. This is where actually, with the exception of urea cycle, we really just need to know general concepts. All right? All right. So before we go, and I have to go and compile my grades and all that stuff, before we do all that, let's just have a little review about the amino acids. We have a couple of things about amino acids. The most important thing is the nitrogen, the amino group. We need to build that. Now, our atmosphere, as we all know, is rich of nitrogen. So we really have no shortage of nitrogen. However, who remembers that in enough? Everybody? Used to be mandatory reading. Isn't mandatory reading in high school? No? Anyone? All right. Well, it's mandatory reading here. Just make sure you read this. It's basically, we have nitrogen everywhere, but we cannot use it. We cannot use it. Okay? We have no clue how to use it because we don't have the enzymatic capability to do it. All right? And the reason is because it really is energy rich. It needs a lot of energy to build it. Now, 25% come from industrial process. Can we believe that? We actually contribute 25%. And this is through making those fertilizers. Look what we need. We need 500 degrees Celsius, 300 atmospheric pressure in order to do this kind of reaction. Bacteria does it, of course, quite simply, just by having enzyme that does 60%. Happens from bacteria, lightning, and other events. This is the miracle enzyme. Remember I talked about photosynthesis, how amazing photosynthesis is the beginning of life and all that stuff? It is. This is the second part of this, which is, well, now photosynthesis does what? With carbon cycle, carbon fixation. This is nitrogen fixation, which is equally important. Because without nitrogen fixation, we don't have amino acids. Without amino acids, we don't have proteins. Without proteins, we will die. So, this enzyme here, nitrogenase, is an amazing enzyme. Before, this is what the enzyme does, as opposed to what nature does. This reaction needs an amazing amount of energy to happen. This enzyme reduces it quite effectively. Very beautifully. Unfortunately, we're not going to have time to talk about the enzymes and how it does that. Because it's really a very involved process of a lot of 3D conformational changes and weak bonds and all that kind of stuff to make this work. But suffice to say, it needs a lot of energy. 18 moles of ATP plus water, plus high energy electrons. Okay? All right, we'll talk about this exciting thing tomorrow. Thank you.